Hi folks, this is Karim Rao from IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Red Arrow lab. This is the video number 44. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. We have been continue working with securing Windows Server 2019 based on the recommendation of the Department of Defense and the Defense Information System Agency of the United States. We have been working for 13 videos. This is the video number 14. We have stopped the last time at this recommendation. We have been talking about that there is something called Windows Defender Exploit protection. This is an option in Windows Defender security, okay, to protect you from various malware and viruses attack. Okay, so this is an option in Windows Defender. Okay, so the Department of Defense and the Defense Information System Agency of the United States recommend some setting for the exploit protection in the Windows Defender. Okay, so we have discussed a lot of these options, okay, and we need to apply them to all of our Windows Defenders in all of our domain, especially computers and servers. So we will do this by applying a group policy. Okay, this group policy will import the setting for the Windows Defender, okay, from a file, and this file will be applied to all of the Windows Defenders in all of our networks. So simply we have a file. This file will be attached to a group policy. This group policy will take this file and import its setting or import its contents to the Windows Defender on all of the PCs. Okay, and this imported content will change the setting in the Windows Defender. Okay, so it is basically unifying the Windows Defender setting, especially the exploit protection setting, on all of our PCs and servers in the domain. So this is done by this file, dodepv3.xml. This file contains the recommended Windows Defender exploit protection setting that the Department of Defense recommend. We will apply this setting to all of our Windows Defenders on all of our PCs and servers. So we have discussed this the last time. Okay, we talked about it. Okay, and we have said before the Windows Defender exploit protection is done on the system level. Okay, and it is done on a program based level, so you can make exploit protection to the system as a whole, the Windows system as a whole, or to a program by program. Okay, so we will do both. Actually, we will do the system level exploit protection, and we will do for the program, okay, for the program's level. And the Department of Defense have some setting for exploit protection for various or famous programs, something like the Adobe Reader, something like the Firefox, something like the Chrome. Okay, so it has some setting concerning the exploit protection for most of these famous programs, and we will do the setting for them based on the file that we have been talking about. The file called dodepxml contains the various exploit protection setting for different programs. Okay, so we have discussed this also in the previous video. So let's go further and see what is the next recommendation. Okay, so the next recommendation say that Windows Server 2019 must only allow administrators responsible for the member server or standalone system to have administrative rights on the system. An account that does not have administrative duties must not have administrative rights. Such rights would allow the account to bypass or modify required security restrictions on the machine and make it vulnerable to attacks. So we need to separate between the administrator duties and the administrator rights. So sometimes administrator duties, you need to maybe install a program, or do something, install, uninstall, remove, for example, a program, remove a driver. So this can be done by a normal account or normal local administrator account. You should not use the domain admin account. So what do I mean by domain admin account? The domain admin account, this is an account that have high privileges on all of the PCs in the domain. Okay, not PCs only and servers. So you should not use this account to log in to a machine and uninstall or remove programs. This account should only be used in the Active Directory, or to change setting in the Active Directory. If you need to do changes on servers on PCs, for example, like removing a software or installing a driver or something like this, you should use another account. So he's saying here that the IT personnel should have different accounts. For example, one account to manage the Active Directory, which is the domain admin account, and then another account to manage the PCs and servers, manage them or manage the normal problems for these servers and PCs. For example, if you need to install a software or you remove a software, this is done by another account. Okay, and a third account for the IT personnel himself, for example, to check emails or to do his normal work. So this is separation of duties. Okay, he's saying here that the domain admins group must be replaced by a domain member server administrator group. Okay, so he's saying here that restricting highly privileged accounts from the local administrative group helps mitigate the risk of privilege escalation resulting from credential theft attack. Anyway, so he's saying here that if you need to manage a server, okay, or a member server, you should use the local administrator account. Okay, the local administrator account of the server. Okay, if this is not a domain controller. Okay, so you can use the local administrator to manage the server. Okay, but do not use the domain admin account. Okay, the domain admin account. Okay, so the domain admin account has high privileges. This should not be used to manage servers or to manage member servers. If you need to manage a member server, you need to use the local administrator user on the member server. Okay, so this is what we have said earlier in the lab, or the beginning of the lab. You should separate your duties to be done by separate accounts or by different accounts. One to manage the Active Directory, one to manage the machines and servers, and one to use it for your normal work. Okay, we have done this already, so this is done. You can go to the local groups on the member server and see, okay, the local administrators group, and see, you should check the local administrators group on the member server and see who are the members of this group. If you see the domain admin account, he is referring that you should remove the domain admin account and create another account in the Active Directory, and this account will be the local administrator. Or you can create a local account, okay, instead of the domain admin account, and this account should be the local or the new local administrator. And by the way, there is also by default a local administrator account that is disabled on Windows Server, or we should disable it and rename it. You can use this account for managing the local server. Anyway, we have talked about this earlier in the lab. Windows Server 2019 local administrator account must have privileges token filtered to prevent elevated privileges from being used over the network on domain joined member servers. So he's saying here, if you need to use a local administrator account on a machine remotely, okay, this account should be prevented from elevation. Should be prevented from elevation. What we mean by prevented from elevation? That you should not use it on another user account. So for example, if you are connecting remotely to a machine, okay, and then when you are connecting remotely to a machine, you are logging in or you are connecting on a user that is already logged in, a standard user, okay, and you need to run your user within the standard user environment or within the standard user login. So you need to do elevation of account or elevation of privileges. Okay, this should not be done. Okay, we have said before, elevation is a very critical process, should not be done. You should not use the elevated privileges on your local administrator account. Let's see here. A compromised local administrator account can provide means for an attacker to move laterally between domain systems. This is correct, but let's see here what he mean by this. You should not use elevated privileges. So with user access control enable. Filtering the privileged token for local administrator account will prevent the elevated privileges of these accounts from being used over the network. So he's saying you should not use elevated privileges remotely on the network. Okay, should not use elevated privileges for local administrators accounts remotely through the network. We have done this and we have already closed the elevated privileges for the local administrators. Okay, so if the local administrator will not be asked to elevate his privileges. So for example, if I am Karim and I'm a standard user, I am logging into a machine and I need to install Firefox. Okay, I am not allowed to do this. So as soon as I double click on the Firefox program, it will ask me to provide a username and password that have the privilege to install this program. This is called, or any program, this is called elevated privileges. So through this window, I can provide my username and password, and then, or the local administrator and username password, and then the installation will complete. This is called elevated privileges, and this is done by the user account control. Okay, so we should not do this process. Okay, we should, if a standard users try to install a program, they should not be asked to provide a local administrator password to install the program. They should be blocked, and should they say that you are not authorized, you need to call your administrator. That's it. Okay, so you should not use elevated privileges on the network. Okay, so we will continue working. This is also done by a group policy. Say apply UEC restrictions to local accounts on network logins. I think we have done this done this recommendation before, but let's see it, or let's do it again. We'll go to the server hardening group policy and then apply the restrictions to local accounts on the network. Okay, so we need to go to, I think, user right assignments, and then we can go and tell him to apply UAC restrictions to local accounts on network. Okay, this is not from the security setting, it is from administrative templates, and then the MS security guide. This is the template for the DoD, or the Department of Defense, and then we need to apply UAC restrictions to local accounts on network. We should do this. Here is saying that this setting controls whether local accounts can be used for remote administration, okay, via network login, okay, net use, or so and so. Local accounts are at high risk for credential theft when the same account, sorry guys, just wait for a moment, we will go further again. So let's apply the setting again here, just a moment, let me. So here is saying apply. Let's again open it and read it. So here it is saying, okay, that local accounts are at high risk for credential theft when the same account and password is configured. Just a moment. So he's saying here that local accounts are at high risk for just a moment, for high risk for credential theft when the same, okay guys, let me read it. Okay, so he's saying here that the setting controls whether local accounts can be used for remote administration. That's it, you can use your local administrator account to connect remotely, or the local administrator account on a machine to connect remotely to it. Local accounts are at high risk for credential theft, okay, when the same account and password is configured on multiple systems. Okay, enabling this policy significantly reduce this risk. Enabled applies UEC token filtering to local accounts on network logins. Membership in powerful groups such as administrators is disabled, and powerful privileges are removed from the resulting access token. This configures the local account token filter registry value to 0. This is the default behavior for Windows. What is the effect? Allow local accounts to have full administrative rights when authenticating via network logging by configuring the local so enabling will disable administrators is disabled and powerful privileges are removed from the resulting access token. So he's saying here that there will be restrictions, okay, to use local accounts at network login. So I think he will restrict the local administrator account privileges. I think he is doing this. So maybe here he is forcing us not to use the local administrator account remotely. You should do this physically from the machine, I think. Anyway, so this is clear, a little bit clear. So you need to try and see the effect of this kind of policy, okay, and then go to the other one. He's saying that domain member joint servers local users should not be enumerated. What do I mean by that enumerated? When you, for example, go and as a standard user log in on a server on a, so you are a standard user account and log into a server and you try to install a program, he will not allow you, or this is number one, he will not allow you, or will give you a window asking to provide a username and password that have the authority to install or have the privilege to install software. Sometimes he give you the username and password field, you should fill them, or he gives you already a name or a list of users, you should select one of them and then provide the password for this user. This is called enumeration, okay? This should not be done because you are giving the hacker, if a hacker try to do this, you are giving the hacker the names of the privileged accounts, so he can only guess the password. You give him half of the information, he can guess the password and he have already the username. So we should not enumerate local users on the domain joined member servers. Domain joined member servers or domain joined computers or workstations, okay? This should not be done, okay? So we can do this also from a group policy. We should do this. So we should go and do this from, I think, from system. And then we need to go to login, and then we need to enumerate local users on domain joined computers. We should disable this group policy, okay? So let's go further with the recommendations. So he's saying for domain controllers as standalone, this is non-available. This only apply to member servers. So this is not applied to the domain controller. I think it should be applied to the domain controller. Anyway, the next recommendation is to restrict unauthenticated remote procedure call clients from connecting to RPC server on domain joined member servers and standalone. He is saying that you need to secure your remote connections, okay, to clients, okay? So saying unauthenticated RPC clients may allow anonymous access to sensitive information. Configuring RPC to restrict unauthenticated RPC clients from connecting to RPC server will prevent anonymous connections. So he's saying here that you need to secure your remote connections to your servers by not allowing unauthenticated users to connect remotely to a server. What by mean unauthenticated users? Unverified usernames and password, okay? So the user should be listed or should be within your domain. He have a valid username and password, and he should be authorized or allowed to access or to remotely connect to your server. So there is two steps. First, we need not to let anyone connect remotely to a server unless he is an authenticated user, and the second thing is to allow certain users to access remotely on a server. This is done also from another group policy. So unauthenticated RPC clients may allow anonymous access to sensitive information. Unauthenticated, so we need to only let authenticated users to connect remotely to our domain member servers and standalone systems, okay? So we can do this also using a group policy. So we'll go and tell him restrict unauthenticated RPC clients, okay, enabled, and then we should tell him authenticated users. Okay, so tell him we need to go to the remote procedure call. And by the way, if any one of you need to know more about the group policy, you can read the explanation. Okay, so unauthenticated, he is saying that this controls how the RPC, okay, it is already said here. Okay, he's saying that this should, within a domain environment, should be used with caution, as it could impact a wide range of functionality, including group policy processing itself. Reverting a change to this policy setting can require manual intervention on each affected machine. This policy setting should never be applied to a domain controller. So he's saying this should not be applied to a domain controller, and this should be applied with caution because in a domain environment. So you should test this setting before applying it to your servers, not to your domain controller. Okay, saying here this should never be applied to a domain controller. Okay, so it's saying here that maybe from what I know here, or what I deduct, that he's saying that some applications connect remotely to a server without authentication, and this is seems to be a normal thing for some applications. So he's saying here you should test this setting before applying it. If it's not configured, then that it remains disabled. So if you leave it unconfigured, this is good, or disabled, this is good. Okay, but enabled, you should take care. So we will enable it and tell him authenticated, but you need to test it carefully in a domain environment with applications and users. So you need to test it. Okay, he's saying this. So good that we have read the explanation. And then the other recommendation is to limit the caching of login credentials to 4 hours or less on domain joined member servers. So why we need to cache our credentials? For example, if you logged into a server, okay, in a domain, so there is a domain joined member server, and you have an account and you logged into this domain joined member server, and after that the connection between you and the domain controller was cut. Okay, so how you can log in again to the domain to this domain joined member server after the connection between you and the domain controller is down? This can be done because your credentials, your username and password, are cached to the machine, so you can log in again without any problem. Okay, if your credentials are not cached, you will not be able to log in to this machine, because your username and password should be first verified to the domain controller, and then he approves that you should access. But there is a caching option that allows you to access the domain joined member server even though the domain controller is not online. Okay, he's saying that caching and this option, you will cache the credentials or save the credentials to your domain joined member server locally, okay, for 4 hours, okay, or less. So he's saying that the default Windows configuration caches or saves the last login credentials for users who log in interactively to a system. This feature is provided for system availability reasons, just as the user machine being disconnected from the network that we have been talking about, or domain controllers being unavailable. Okay, even though the credential cache is well protected, if a system is attacked, an authorized individual may isolate the password to a domain user account using a password cracking program and gain access to the domain. So he's saying that this cached domain user credentials can be hacked. Okay, but for system availability reasons, this option is very critical. So we will not disable this option, but we will limit the time, or we will lessen the time the credentials that are cached to your local Windows system. Okay, so let's continue, or let's go and configure this group policy. So let's go to interactive login, number of previous logins to cache. In case he's saying here in the domain controller, this will be cached for let's see here. So we'll go to security, and then I think local policy, and then security options, and then cache of credentials. Let's see here how much time he will cache the credentials. Okay, let's see. So number of previous logins to cache here in case of domain controller is not available. So it's saying this. Let's see, this will be for 4 logins. Okay, I think he's saying here for 4 logins he will cache 4 logins, or the last 4 users. Okay, the last 4 users, I don't think for 10 hours. Let's see here what he's saying. He will cache, or he will save the last logged 4 users on the machine. So the last 4 users logged into a machine, their credentials will be cached. But for how much time? Let's take full, or let's see further on the recommendation what he's saying here. So he's saying that let's go for a little bit further here. Again. So saying it will be he is not defining the time. He will cache the last 4 users that has logged into a member server. So he doesn't say the time. Okay, say not 4 hours, 4 users. Okay, how much time? I don't know actually how it will, or how much time it will be cached, but he's saying that you should only limit it to the last 4 users. Okay, so you should not cache a lot of logged users on the machine locally. Okay, so let's go and tell him to here is saying that this is again the group policy, and you tell him to cache it to the last 4 users. So okay, define this policy and then him the last 4 users and apply and OK. And then let's continue with the recommendations. Here is saying that remote calls to security account manager to administrators on domain joined member servers and standalone system. What is SAM? SAM, this is a place where your usernames and password are saved to. Okay, this is locally on every machine in the domain. So on your servers you have SAM, on your workstations you have SAM. So this is where your local users usernames and password are saved, and your domain username and passwords are saved. Okay, and we have said before why we need to save or cache your username and password of your domain for system availability. Anyway, so this is where your username and passwords are saved locally or through the domain. So this security account manager should not be accessed remotely unless it is the local administrator that is trying to connect to this SAM account. So you can get all of the users stored passwords from the SAM. The Windows SAM stores user password. Restricting remote procedure call connections to the SAM to administrators help protect those credentials. So only local administrators will be allowed to connect remotely to the SAM Windows SAM stores or the Windows SAM files remotely. So let's see, or let's continue. We need to do this through a group policy, so we need to restrict accessing to the SAM file that contains the stored user name and passwords. Okay, so let's go to the security option, local policy, security option, network access, restrict clients allowed to make remote calls to SAM. So let's go to the security and tell him restrict access to SAM remotely. So we need to restrict yes, call access called, or define here network access, restrict clients allowed to make remote calls to SAM, and then edit security, and then this should be allowed to local administrators on the machine or the local administrators group on the machine. So now we tell him apply and OK. So this is good. And then let's continue working with the other recommendations. So here is saying that access this computer from network should be assigned to administrators and authenticated users groups on domain joined member servers and standalone system. We have done this group policy before, by the way. This is duplicated. We have done this before. Okay. Authenticated users and enterprise, I think enterprise domain controllers, but this was for the domain controller. This is for the member server. So access this computer from network for the domain controller, and access this computer from network from the normal member servers or for servers. We have done this already before. We have done this for the domain controller, but we will do this for the member server. Okay. And the difference is, for the member server, the enterprise domain controllers group is not listed. Okay, so this is, we have done this before. Deny access this computer for network on domain joined member server must be configured to prevent access from highly privileged domain accounts and local accounts, and from unauthenticated access on all systems. So he's saying here that Windows Server 2019 should not be accessed by unauthenticated groups. He's saying here are authenticated groups like local guest groups on the server. This is unauthenticated group, or not highly secure group, guest group. And you should also prevent highly privileged domain accounts, something like the domain admin account, the enterprise admin account, the schema admin account, should not access member servers through the network. Why is this? Because, as we have said before, if you access the member server with a domain admin account, and after that this server is hacked, your domain admin account password will be known and it will be hacked. Okay, so what we do, if you need to access your Windows Server 2019 to do to do a certain problem or to check a certain problem, do this with the local administrator account on the server, not with the domain admin account of the domain. Okay, so you should prevent access for highly privileged domain accounts. And local accounts, here is saying local accounts, the not in specific the local administrator, is saying other local accounts. For example, you should not put a standard user account or local user account on a Windows Server 2019. Okay, you should only leave the local administrator account and remove any other user, okay, other than that. So it's saying that the domain admin accounts and the standard local accounts and unauthenticated users should not access, or should be denied access to the Windows Server 2019 member server that have joined the domain to access this computer from network, not locally. Okay, so we should see deny access this computer from network. Should see this account, or should he who is not allowed to do this. So he's saying here, let's see here, he's saying that enterprise admin group is saying here the following accounts groups are not defined for deny access. If the following accounts are not defined for deny access this computer from network, user right, this is a finding. So you should include enterprise admin group, domain admin group, local account and member of administrator group, local account and a member of administrator group are not defined. So it's saying here that domain systems only, enterprise admins, domain admins, local account and member of administrators group. So how we can access the member server? Local account and a member of administrators group. So it's saying this should be taken into consideration, this one. Okay, and guest group, this is the unauthenticated users. So he is blocking enterprise admins and domain admins. This is normal. And the local administrator, this is something we need to take into consideration. Local account and member of administrator group, this should be taken into consideration. This should be revised. Okay, anyway, so we will see here is saying that local account, so there is a group called S15114, local account and member of administrators group, or S15113, local account. So here I think we should not use S15114. We should use S15113. Okay, so we should leave this one. What is S115? Let me see, or let me have a look on the SID, because I don't know the name of this group. Let's wait for a moment. So we have S dash 1 SID. Okay, let's wait for a moment. And see what is this SID. Let's wait for a moment. So let's continue, guys. Here I have seen this URL. It's talking about block remote network access for local user accounts. I think this is the one. The group policy is implying, or this is referring to, using local accounts, including the local administrator, to access another computer over network in Active Directory environments is not recommended on a number of reasons. The same local administrator username and password are often used on many computers, so the local account username and password are almost, or are all the same on all computers and servers if you have use an image. Okay, so which can put multiple devices at risk if a single computer is compromised. However, access to the network resources with local accounts is hard to personify and centrally monitor, because such events are not logged on AD or Active Directory domain controllers. So he is saying that to mitigate this risk, administrators can rename the default local Windows administrator account. We have done this in the beginning of the lab, and to regularly change the local administrator passwords on all computers on the domain using Microsoft Labs. I have discussed this before. But these solutions will not be able to solve the problem of restricting network access for all local user accounts, since there can be more than one local account on a computer. So you can have a local administrator account and the standard local account, or standard user local account, or more than one local administrator account. So you can restrict network access for all local accounts using deny this access, or deny access to this computer from network policy. But this policy required to explicitly list all accounts that needed to be denied. So you need to list the users that will be blocked from accessing the PC, okay, through the network or through the domain, especially the local accounts. Okay, here is saying in Windows 8.1 and Windows Server, well-known security IDs are appearing. One includes all local users and the second includes all local administrators. So this is 113. This is the local account, so all normal local accounts, and then we have local account and a member of administrator group. So this should be included. This is what we mean by 114 and 113. So here is saying now to restrict access for local accounts, you can use their common SID. These groups are added to the user access token during login to the computer under local accounts. To make sure your administrator is assigned to new security, that in Windows your local account is assigned to new security groups, NT run the command. Okay, you can use these built-in security groups after upgrade. So if you can check if this security exists on your Windows device. In order to block the remote access under local user accounts, you should use deny remote desktop. So this is the deny remote desktop, but you will deny also accessing the local user accounts from the network. So he's saying that your local administrator will not be able to access the server if it is within the domain. So I think you can access it locally, but not through the network, using the local account. Anyway, so this is what he mean by block access. But here is deny access this computer from network. Here is saying that local accounts will be denied, including the local administrator account. So this should be taken into consideration. Okay, so we should take into consideration that the local administrator account will not be able to access the domain join member server, okay, within the domain. It should be outside the domain, or it should be unplugged or disconnected from the domain. Okay, so we should see this more restrictive, but because issue server that provide failure clustering. These note here, local account is more restrictive but may cause issues on servers such as systems that provide failover clustering, so take care also of this one. So this is one that I think it should be taken into consideration, local administrators and their access. Anyway, so let's continue working here. We also should deny login as batch. The next recommendation, we have done this for the domain controller, we should do this for the member server, but deny access as batch should be also for enterprise admins groups and domain admin groups. This is normal. Okay, we should not use it to run a script. We should not use the enterprise admin or the domain admin to run a script. We can create a user and dedicate it for this job. Okay, and also the guest groups should not be able to run login as batch or to run scripts. Okay, so this also should be done. And deny login as service, here he say also that deny as service should not also be done by the enterprise admins or the domain admins. You should not use a domain admin account or enterprise admin account to run a service or to run an application. To run a service, something like the SQL Server service, you should not use the domain admin account to run SQL Server services to be able to access your SQL database. Okay, so this is also normal. Okay, so all of these recommendations we have done it for the domain controllers, but this is for the member servers. So let's continue. So it's deny login as access for the enterprise admin groups and the domain admin groups, and then we should deny login locally. Here we can see that we should deny login locally to the machine or to the member server for the enterprise admins and the domain admins and the guest group. Note here that the local administrators group is not included, so we should not let the enterprise admins or domain admins log in to a member server machine locally, this or even through the network. The only one that is authorized to access the machine locally, it is the local administrator, or even through the domain, I think the local administrator. Anyway, so the local administrator is the only one authorized to access the server locally or through the domain. Okay, so this should be taken into consideration, and the guest groups should not also be allowed to access the machine locally. Okay, and then we have the option to, let me see, because that passed me. Okay, so we can get a little bit further here. Deny login as batch, you have done this, and deny user locally, and I think we can go further again. Okay, so it's saying here that we should also deny login remotely. Who is the should be denied from remotely accessing the member server? Let's see here. So he also here is saying that high privileged domain accounts and local accounts and unauthenticated users should not access or denied access to the member server remotely. So the domain admin, let me show you something here. So what we have here, the domain admin, the enterprise admins, the local accounts including the local administrator, and the guest group should not be allowed to access the member server remotely. Okay, and should not be allowed to access the member server, some of them not to access the member server locally or through the network and remotely. So all of these are to control who access the server. Okay, so these groups, the local account, which should include the local administrator, domain admins, enterprise admins, guest groups, all of these are denied to access the member server remotely. okay. So he's saying here a little bit of the note. Local account is referring to a built-in security group. Anyway, I think all of this is to control and to secure your server. So your server or member server should be denied access locally by the domain admins and the enterprise admins, and denied access to the network also from the domain admins and enterprise admins, and to access remotely through also the domain admins and enterprise admins. So all high privilege accounts should be blocked from accessing the member server, okay. Then we go to the member server. Enable computer and user accounts to be trusted for delegation, must not be assigned to any groups or domain joined member servers. And standalone, we have done this for the domain controller, and we will do this for the member servers. Trust for delegation, we have said this before. This option enables you to delegate. If a user has the option of trusted for delegation checked, then you can delegate some of your rights to this user, okay. So we should give this right, he's saying, not to anyone, okay. So let's go to the option. So let's go enable trustful delegation. This should be, I think, done for the local administrators, but here is saying that you should not choose any group, not to be defined. So enable computers and users to be trusted for delegation. This is done by local administrators on the domain controller, but as for the member server, this should not be given to any group, okay. So we should leave it not defined, okay. So let's continue with the recommendation. So just wait for a moment, guys. So let's continue, guys. Here we will say that we need to enable computer and user accounts to be trusted for delegation on a local group policy of member servers. This should not be defined, so no one can delegate rights or anything to computer or user accounts. Here is saying that there is another thing, that you need to have the credential. Here first of all we need to make it not defined, okay. So here you need to make it blank, okay. So you need to enable computer user accounts to be trusted for delegation as blank, okay. And then he's saying that you need to have Credential Guard. This is an option in Windows Server and Windows 10 to secure your credentials by saving them and encrypting them. So Credential Guard user virtualization based security, this is an option in your hardware to protect data that could be used in credential theft attacks if compromised. The authentication information which was stored in the local security authority in previous versions of Windows is isolated from the rest of the operating system and can be accessed by privileged system software. Anyway, the Credential Guard is an option to protect your usernames and passwords, or your user account, okay, by saving it and encrypting it. So we need to know if this option is enabled on our Windows server, okay. We can run a certain command to know if we have the Credential Guard up and running. We need first to know if there is the hardware, or we have the hardware to support this feature, okay. If we have the hardware to support this feature and this feature is not enabled, we can enable it using a group policy, but need to first to know if we have this option enabled. And if it's not enabled, it is a software issue or your hardware is not compatible, okay. So we need to run a certain PowerShell command to see if the Credential Guard is up and running. So we will go to the domain controller. We have done this before, by the way, but this should be done not on the domain controller but on a normal or on a member server. So we will put the password and then we will run the command. So we can go down and then run the command. Okay, right click, not set, sorry, we need to run the command. So we need to go and copy the command and run it. and see if we have the Credential Guard up and running. So let's go and see it. We need to go to the domain controller and run the command and press enter. So we need to see if we have the Credential Guard up and running, and the Credential Guard will not run unless the virtualization based security is running. Okay, so we have virtualization based security. Here we can see that security service is 0 and the virtualization based security is 0, so we don't have the Credential Guard running. So we need to, if you have the necessary hardware, we can enable it using a group policy. Okay, so you can go to device guard, turn on virtualization based security to enable and enable with UEFI lock. Okay, so we need to go and enable this group policy to enable Credential Guard on our server. Okay, so we can go to administrative templates, I think, not this one, administrative templates, and then we can go to Credential Guard, or we can go to system and then device guard. Okay, and then we need to tell him turn on virtualization based security, and then we need to enable, and then to tell him to have enabled with UEFI lock selected for Credential Guard delegation or Credential Guard virtualization. Let's see here, Credential Guard configuration. Okay, so we need to do this. Then the other recommendations is to have a certificate, okay, authority installed in the trusted root store. So the certificates are used to verify if some websites are trusted or you can access them. So the DoD root certificate, this is a certificate issued by the websites of the Department of Defense, and it is given to the client. So you have the Department of Defense website, and you need to secure, or you need to verify the users accessing this website. So you make the website, issue a certificate, and give the user the certificate. The user that has this certificate will access the DoD website. So this is called a certificate. You need to have a web server, and the web server issue a certificate, install it to your clients, so your clients can access the website of the Department of Defense. So this is to secure the access, or to verify the users accessing the DoD websites, especially if the DoD website is secure and contains sensitive information. Okay, so saying that the certificate of DoD web server should be in the trusted root store. Okay, so this should be done. Okay, and there will be a couple of recommendations also concerning the certificates, but this is the first one. So I think we will stop here. Okay, we will stop at this recommendation, and we will continue in the upcoming video, or the upcoming part. So hope this video informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and if you need to have a private course, if you have this material and you love it, you can have a private course. Contact me on my Telegram channel or WhatsApp or my Facebook. Good to hear from you. Thank you so much.